Thank you all for being here. My name is Amy Rasmussen, and I'm CAPE's Executive Director. If I haven't met you, welcome to the CAPE Gallery. It's so great to see so many familiar faces. For everybody who's here, how many people this is your first time here? Great. We're so happy that more people are seeing our gallery. We'll talk a little bit about our show in a few minutes, but I would like to start off with a couple thoughts as we present our STEAM Ahead project tonight. So CAPE's mission is to increase students' academic success, critical thinking, and creativity through research-based, arts-driven education. It's kind of a mouthful, some concepts, but the research-based piece is something that we're really excited to share with you tonight. We enact our mission by fostering partnerships between teachers and teaching artists that weave together the arts and academics in classrooms across Chicagoland, in Chicago and in the suburbs, as we're featuring tonight. We mostly focus on working in high-needs schools where children have economic and academic challenges far beyond typical students. So we're very proud to do this work. It's very challenging work, and a lot of appreciation goes to our teaching artists and partner teachers who are there every day with our students. We reach about 4,000 students a year, and we're in about 50 schools. So tonight, we're focused on our STEAM Ahead project that we have been working on for the past 4 or 5 years or so. Through the collaboration with our evaluators, we really are able to enact our research-based mission. And what does that mean for us? It means deeply looking at teacher practice so that our teachers can more deeply understand the impact of the arts on student learning, so that our artists have more knowledge about how to interact with students in the classroom. And hopefully, in the long term, this helps our students learn better and give teachers more capacity to work with students where they are. Our bigger goal is so that students really have the creative, entrepreneurial, educational capacity to be great citizens in the 21st century and be the leaders that we need them to be to help us navigate the world. So as we get started, I just wanted to acknowledge the deep partnership of School District 163, Park Forest, Chicago Heights, the interim superintendent, Dr. Joyce Carmine, and the Performing Arts Director, Cheryl Munch, is here tonight. Thank you, Cheryl, for being here. They were our deep partners in this project, which had a lot of complexity and which you'll hear about. Finally, I wanted to acknowledge the funding that we received for this project was a grant from the U.S. Department of Education that was awarded in the fall of 2018 for about $2.3 million. CAPE's proposal was selected out of a very competitive process. We were one of 22 grantees in that year. The U.S. Department of Education provides about $20 million in funding for projects like this across the country. That is not enough money to do the work that the creative sector needs to do to understand the impact of its work on student learning. So if you're interested in this and you're committed to this work, please include advocacy efforts. Reach out to your legislators, reach out to your senators so that they know you support projects like this, because this funding is but a small blip in the budget of the U.S. Department of Education. And we'd really like it to continue, but there's always uncertainty, so we need your public support for it as much as possible. And with that, I will wrap up and introduce Mark Diaz, our Associate Director of Education, who's going to start the presentation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Diaz, Associate Director of Education at CAPE. I've had the good fortune of working with these fine people over the past 4 years on this program. And it was just a complete pleasure to see it develop and to see all of the work that went into it. So thank you for being with Chicago Arts Partnerships and Education this evening to hear about CAPE's 4-year STEAM Ahead program. we are pleased to share with you the research findings of the impact of the STEAM project on student learning and creativity. We're happy to do so here in our new gallery space dedicated to the exhibition of student arts integrated projects. The exhibition you see tonight is called I Do, We Do, You Do, the Student Instruction Show, which features student-made instruction pieces, attempts to shift the student's role from a learner to an instructor of an art-making process. The exhibit recalls the instruction pieces of the conceptual artists of the 60s and 70s, and curator Hans Ulrich Olbrich's 2013 Do It exhibition, where artists exhibited written instructions for viewers to interpret and create. I Do, We Do, You Do is a platform for students to conceptualize a process and enact open-ended participation. This and future exhibitions in this gallery will shine a light on how young people think and learn through contemporary art practice. Our presenters for this evening will also shed light on how students think and learn through integrating STEM and art making. In 2018, CAPE brought its arts integration model to Park Forest, Chicago Heights School District 163 to enable collaborations between K through 5th grade STEAM and art teachers and teaching artists in developing and teaching STEAM curricula. The participating teachers and teaching artists participated in regular, intensive, ongoing professional learning sessions designed by a team of educational consultants specializing in science, engineering, and art learning. Tonight, you'll hear from our team on how they planned and laid out the PD delivery in exploring art making as the cross-cutting practice that weaves through and connects science, technology, engineering, and math. Disciplines and knowledge formation. They will be followed by the teaching artists who will discuss the impact of professional learning workshops on tailoring their lesson plans for each grade level and school setting, instructional delivery, experience in the classroom, and student responses. Dr. Louanne Smolin, the STEAM Ahead Principal Investigator, will present research and what the data tells us about teacher professional growth and student learning through the STEAM Ahead program. Afterward, we will introduce you to the STEAM Ahead curriculum website. Our website architects will lead a guided tour of the site. They will highlight key features of this educational resource for educators and school administrators to implement lessons and PD activities. I just want to also acknowledge all of the participants in the program over the past 4 years. Not everyone is here. We've had quite a bit of some turnover, but I'd like to just go through all the names that have participated. I first want to start with Patty Whitehouse, Dr. Jenna Senai, Jerry Stefl, our third educational consultant, is not with us tonight because of illness, so we wish him well. And then we worked with 5 schools at Park Forest, Chicago Heights. The first school is 21st Century Primary, and the teacher at that school was Andrea Mealy. She worked with the artist Jordan Knecht, who is here, and David Sprecher, who's also here. And in the first year of the program, she worked with Juan Carlos Perez and Mirtis Zrezinski. Black Hawk Primary was the other school. The teacher we worked with there was Eileen Ward. Kimberly Houston Moore was the teaching artist in that partnership, and also Molly Cranch. And there was another teaching artist in the program by the name of Ellen Trischler, who is no longer with the program. Mohawk Primary was the third school, and sitting there is the teacher, Lori Mitchell. She worked with 3 artists, Andre Lemus Spont, Maria Spont Lemus, and Strelo Harris. At one point, we did work with another art teacher at the school by the name of Anne-Marie Zarlengo. The last two schools we work with were the 4th through 8th grade schools, but in the last year, we only just worked with one of them. The two schools were Barack Obama School of Leadership and STEM, Michelle Obama School of Technology and the Arts was the 5th school. We worked with the 4th and 5th grade classrooms there with the two arts teachers, Francesco Wesley and Patricia Novikas. The teaching artists that worked at those schools were Mark Fisher, Naima Qureshi, Lale Motlag, Alana Ferguson, Michael Lopez, and Neil Vandenberg. So I'd like to acknowledge all of those people who weren't able to come tonight to share their thoughts about the program. So we will now turn to the first presentation about the PD framework. We'll be hearing from Patty Whitehouse, who serves as the educational consultant, is a former Chicago Public Schools K-6 engineering teacher. Dr. Jenna Senai, who's here, is an associate professor of science education at Concordia University.
All right, so the professional development component of this was really focused on helping teachers and then helping the students really understand the connections between science, art, science, technology, STEM and art, I should say. We are going to just kind of show you a couple of different things from our summer PDs. We had summer PDs, we also had school year PDs. And the summer PDs really kind of were much more of a larger focus, and then the school year kind of continued on those themes for the couple of years that we worked on these. The big thing that we want to really emphasize here is teachers and administrators. The PDs we have here, which we will show a little bit later, are things that you could literally, we have the PDFs, you could take those with you and you could modify them and use them any way that you can see fit as part of a program that you would like to work on. So.
Am I going the wrong way? So we want to talk first a little bit about, the design of our PDs. The three of us spent a lot of hours together really planning what we were going to do over the summer, what was going to be our theme, what did the teachers want to work on, what are the teaching artists want to work through. And so it was a really collaborative effort through everywhere. So as Patty said, we planned the summer PDs, which were usually 2 days. Sometimes they were in person, and of course with COVID, they were over the internet for 2 days, but they were really interactive. And then our school year PDs were, every other month in person, working with everybody on site at the school. And so we really wanted to develop a lot of different things. We wanted, of course, to work on our STEAM project. We wanted to really think about art and science and what are some of the practices that go into this. And we really wanted them, the teachers and the teaching artists, to really practice their art making as well. And really work through the STEM and the art and do some science in there as well. And so, as Patty said, all of our everything that we have done for PD is on our website, which you'll see at the end here. So here are some of our focuses of our PD, and this really is kind of overarching for the 5 years that we worked on this project, really focusing on our art and our science standards. Of course, a lot of our teachers were pretty familiar with either the art or the science, so we exposed them to, the science standards and to art. I definitely am a science person, and I learned a lot about the art standards through Jerry and working on this project. So, we didn't want to kind of focus on one or the other. So for us, we focused for, most of our PDs on these cross-cutting concepts that come out in the next generation science standards, which also correlate to our national art standards. So two of the examples that we used in this project were patterns and cause and effect. So you can kind of see that those both relate to science and to art. And those were our themes. We would start the theme in the summer, really thinking about patterns through the lens of an artist by doing some art, then through the science lens, and then really connect those to the curriculum that we were having the teachers write, and then kind of going through the school year. So you'll see examples of those as our teaching artists present some of the projects that you'll do. So you kind of will see that cross-cutting concept theme throughout, as we go through all of our examples. But we really kind of spent a really long time as consultants making sure that we were really thoughtful about our PDs. We always provided science examples. We did science different activities when we were in person or online. We always did art making, which was super fun. Different examples, again, relating to those cross-cutting concepts, and also presenting new artists to the teachers and kind of adding those things as we went. And we were always collaborating. So sometimes we would meet with the teaching artists prior to PD. They helped us with a lot of the activities through PD, really presenting some of their art and helping us. So these are kind of the themes that really focused our PD. And we're just going to go through a couple examples of our PDs that we did over there's so many. We couldn't pick one or two to kind of do. Hold on. So later you will see this we're so proud of this. We spent a lot of time on this. This is our PD section of our website. You can see that it has all of the professional development from everything that we did. So the summer ones, the school year ones, and all the way up until, the 2022 school year. And you can see those themes, the cross-cutting concepts, the art making, the science, kind of there. And so we'll kind of go through that, but these are the things that came out of our PD. I think this is my favorite one that we've done because we've done it in so many different ways. But this is really one of my favorite activities that we did. And we asked the teachers and the teaching artist to draw a scientist and to draw an artist, right? That was the first thing that we asked them. We didn't give them any directions. And, what do they look like? And we'll show some examples from our teaching artists and from students of asking them this question. It's one of my favorite questions to ask them. And, we had a discussion about, what did you draw? What did it look like? Do they look different? All the different conversations that you can imagine would come out of that. And of course, then we did some team building. This was right after COVID. It was like the first time we were in person again. And we basically give everybody newspapers and masking tape. And the only direction is to build a self-standing tower. And we give them a certain amount of time. And this is, as you can imagine, it was pretty fun. And some of them were up to the ceiling or along the ceiling. And so, what we did after this is we talked about these processes that went into making these towers, right? So we talked about what did you do? What were some of the activities you did when you were building your tower? So using examples of our tower building activity, and then really thinking about what are some of the science things that we were doing, what are some of the art things that we were doing. And even as part of this process, we kind of used science practices and art practices, and we had them try to separate them into two piles, into science and art. And if you've ever done that before, it's not very easy because they're related to each other. So what we really got out of that was, it's really hard to do this because a lot of them are related. And that's what we really wanted to get out of that, is that, STEM and art are not two separate things. They are interrelated, and it's really easy to integrate something like STEAM. And we also, like, you can't read these quotes, but if you go onto the website, the research team, they ask the students if you can do art and science at the same time. And their answers are amazing, right? They're like, no, you can't do math problems and use a paintbrush at the same time. So these are some of the great things that came out of this. And we really, as a PD team, we really wanted to focus on the integration of all of this. And we really worked a lot with all of these different concepts. And I know some of our teaching artists use the science and artist activity in the classroom with their students, and they got some really cool artifacts out of that too. Yep. So these are my favorite. This one's the scientist and an artist. So it says experiments and artists paint for money. We have some, and so these are from our some of our teaching artists and teachers, which came out really cool. Asking them to draw the different examples of that. And this is an interesting one, of course, because we definitely have teachers and teaching artists and students who draw two separate, people. One is an artist and one is a scientist. This person, like, you can see that they're connected, and so this is kind of what we wanted to get out of that at the end. And so this was really fun to see everybody kind of go through this activity. And we've even done this at some conferences and all over the place. We actually took this on the road to the National Science Teachers Association when it was in Chicago in 2022. And we had them do the same activity. We had them build the towers out of newspaper, and you can see here, this is from NSDA, you can see how large the towers were. It was kind of a standing room only crowd for this activity, and so, we got some really great feedback from this activity and working with all of our teachers and teaching artists.
And yes, there are teachers standing on stage.
It was really fun.
Fully engaged, and that was one of the things that we really also wanted to focus on, is that STEAM is an engaging activity. So, as we were talking about before, we had summer PDs that were 2 or 3 days of 2 to 3 hours each, and the school year PDs continued whatever we were working on during the school year. During both of them, we tried to give a lot of time for the teaching artists and the teachers to collaborate and work on whatever lessons they were working on and to create stuff. Our responsibility was to not create the lessons. Our responsibility was to create the environment to be able to work collaboratively to make lessons that made sense for those teachers. So.
I went the wrong way.
So one of our PDs, as we said before, is that we wanted to introduce art concepts and introduce new artists. We talked about Bill Traylor and his very simple design aspects and giving students the opportunity to be able to create those, as well as the teachers during their PD. And looking at how this could be also reflected as a science component. If you're looking at animals in your neighborhood, how could you draw those animals? You could use the ideas from Bill Traylor, who used shapes as part of his development. And we have this idea here, and again, this is an outline of the PD. There's a whole slideshow that you could use that we'll show you later. This was the second PD that we did after we did the Bill Traylor. We looked at science, and we looked at a pendulum swinging and how a pendulum, the number of swings during a certain period of time, and tried to relate, obviously it's a science concept, but also created a booklet for them to be able to put their notes in that gave them an opportunity to be more artistic about it, and then how could we use time and measuring time as an artistic concept. So we're trying to marry those two things as part of our summer PD. And then you can see they had time to work on their their school year projects. These are the school year PDs. You can see, and again, this is available when we look at our website. You can see that we have artists, we have art making, and at the very end of the year, the PDs were school year presentations. And let me tell you, they knocked our socks off. They were just amazing projects that the artists were able to do and incorporate science and art. Yeah, and we already just talked about this. Essentially, the PDs sort of follow a pattern where we talk about a certain artist and science practices or a particular artist. We, again, look through those, whatever cross-cutting concept from the science and see how we can interweave it into an artistic concept. We do some art making and then give the teachers and the teaching artists an opportunity to collaborate and work on their lesson plans, assessment, anything else that they want to continue to work on. This was an opportunity for, This is at the very end of the year, presenting their sessions. The teachers had in-person or an online opportunity to share what their students did. This was looking at a point of view and what happens when we change our place in space. And it was looking at point of view from different angles, from a bird's eye view, from an ant's eye view, from a human eye view. And these were some of the artwork that they did. Is that it?
Yeah.
So hopefully you'll be inspired to do some of this PD on your own and use some of the stuff that we have here. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Patty and Jenna. Now we will pivot to the classroom with the teaching artists. The four teaching artists who will be presenting will be Molly Cranch, who does children's books and is a author and illustrator. She is a Chicago-based artist, of course. She received her BFA in painting from Washington University in St. Louis and a K-12 certification in art education from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Jordan Knecht is a Chicago-based arts educator, musician, DJ, and systems designer. Jordan's work is rooted in play, a guiding force which informs all projects and collaborations. Following Jordan will be Kim Houston Moore, who has spent 20 years as an educator with Chicago Public Schools and the last 15 years teaching her first love, visual art. Lastly, as teaching artist, David Sprecher will speak. He currently teaches at the Chicago Academy for the Arts and at the School of the Art Institute. Molly?
Hi. So my name's Molly Cranch, and I was working at Blackhawk Elementary, and I'm going to speak a little bit about some of the projects I created with my team, and also talk a little bit about how the professional development sessions informed both curriculum development and teaching practice. So I'm just going to kind of speak a little bit from my memory and maybe refer to this as well. One of the things that, the professional development sessions were really important in terms of introducing planning and some of the important concepts that we were to kind of hit on in our teaching. And I remember cross-cutting concepts was new to me, so that time was really valuable for me to kind of talk that through with my teaching partner and also fellow, the STEAM teacher. But one of the most important aspects of the STEAM Head professional development sessions is that they provide opportunities for teachers and teaching artists to get to know one another on a personal level. We are often tasked with challenges or questions to tackle through collaboration and art making. I recall one activity in particular, the tower building activity, and we were tasked with building a tower representing our hopes and dreams using simple materials. In order to complete this task, we were required to communicate and work together to solve a problem Each member of the group contributed their creative ideas, process, problem-solving skills. This was really fun having artists and scientists working together because, one person might say, oh, this looks, I want to create something visually, and then we would have, different kinds of thinking going into this activity. Some towers were tall, some used, I imagine we were using more materials in my memory, but some people used like their bodies to create the towers. Some people, built the towers off of a wall. Some people were building them straight up. So there were different approaches. Some were very practical, some were even more conceptual, like there was this whole idea behind the towers. And each group had a final result that was very unique and different. So again, just to reiterate, for me, really what I got out of the professional development was just that time to get to know the team, to kind of work through some of the concepts. But getting to know the team is really important when you're collaborating. Having that time just to kind of work through things is very helpful. Oop, this way. Oh, as a teaching artist, I really enjoy creating and collaborating with colleagues. The process connects me to my own process as an artist. It also allows me to think like a student, which then helps me to create more authentic and relatable lessons. And finally, collaboration provides a space for me to build relationships with my teaching partners, which is the foundation of arts integration. So yeah, I think that's also another piece to remember is like when we were creating that tower, we were like kids again, and that's really important when you're, when you're planning your lessons or planning your units is to get back into that sense of like what it's like to be an artist, what it's like to be a student. So that's also important. Oh, I think this is what so I just wanted to share some examples of student work, just because that's what it's all about in my opinion. And these were just, I think that I want to reiterate is like the cross-cutting concepts of pattern and cause and effect. So these projects are kind of different in their range. This was a mixed media self-portrait project. We were working with pattern and different like levels perspective. That was also something we were working with. And then introduced the artist Faith Ringgold. This was a project we worked with. Again, we were working with pattern, cause and effect. We were looking at the different perspectives. This was Lake Michigan and then the city of Chicago. And this was actually new for some of the students in this area. They weren't actually familiar with Lake Michigan and the downtown area. So we really were able to sort of talk about that and think about that both visually, and then we talked about the history and the science behind it. Okay, landscape drawings, different perspectives. And this was one of my favorite. This was when we were working from home. Yeah, we were working from home, and so we were looking outside the window. We were talking about nature in our neighborhood, and we were also working with different materials, sometimes, working with whatever materials we could find. So I really enjoyed it. And this was based on Joseph Cornell as well, the shadow box artist. I think that's all I have. I'll conclude with that.
All right, so I'm going to piggyback off of what Molly was talking about with the development through professional development and how that influenced what we're doing in the classroom. So I'm going to specifically talk to you all about different collaborations with classroom teachers. So throughout this program, we're working year-round with the STEAM teacher, and each time the kids are coming into our classroom for our different lessons, the classroom teacher is coming in and participating, shadowing. But then there's these 3 sessions each year where we actually get to collaborate with the classroom teacher, looking at the specific needs that they're wanting. So not only integrating science, technology, engineering, art, and math, but also looking at what if they have some social studies they need to do? What are the specific issues that they need for their specific classroom? So we have these unique opportunities to take some of their needs and develop even more specific curriculum. For different classrooms, so I worked with kindergarten through 3rd grade. I looked at a lot of the basic art needs for students and tried to make sure we touched on these, like what are primary colors? So with kindergarten, we're looking at color blending with crayons because that's just something they need to know. They need to know how do you make purple. And it's really fun to do it intuitively and do it in a tactile way, and to also do it experimentally, to still look at how they can be kind of reverse engineering colors, looking at secondary colors and things like this in a very tactile way. With older students, we're looking at more rigorous materials. So we're looking a little bit at watercolor, something where you can start to actually look at chemical reactions, get more into science that way. And then we also took it a little bit further into color theory with waves, with light waves. So having them figure out how to make an LED light work and then how to blend with partners. This was at a point in time also in class where they weren't really allowed to touch each other, so we were trying to figure out ways to involve social and emotional learning, collaboration in ways that were healthy and safe for them. So using light with these dividers was another way that they could be interacting with people. But that led us to these more specific classroom curricula that we designed. This one was with kindergartners. The teacher and I were talking about how do we get kids to do basic math, arithmetic. A lot of their students actually just don't like adding. And so what we did was we took the infrastructure that was already there, these dividers in between everyone, and we decided to let them have some autonomy of their space by designing those and using these different colored papers so that they could interact with adding different colors together to make complex colors. So that was a way that we were able to get all these kindergartners to start doing math, but also to be creative because they could do whatever shapes they wanted. They could see it around the classroom and feel really proud of what they had made. So this is just some examples of different ways that students are doing this. We'd also do really quick assessments with them by walking around and saying, what did you make? What is this? Tell me the equation. They'd say, well, blue plus yellow equals green. And we're like, oh, that's how that worked. And we could tell really quickly without even having to do a worksheet, this kid knows how to do this. And they had a lot of fun. They were smiling while they were doing it. So we kind of tricked them into doing things they didn't like doing. It got actually pretty wacky. We started getting really complex. We started designing windows and things like this, figuring out ways for them to take what they learned and then apply it everywhere, continuing this sense of autonomy in their space, so they're creating their environment. We also worked with these older students on a similar project, but one of the classroom teachers I was working with was talking about how their students needed to learn arrays in their math class. They needed to learn multiplication, but also just how to grid something out. So we randomly partnered them or paired them up. Sometimes it was larger groups, and then part of SEL that we did with them was that they had to negotiate. They had to mediate. What do you do if not everyone in the group wants to do the same image? They had to figure out how to make this image out of Post-it notes. So not only are they're doing engineering because they're planning, they're filling a window with Post-it notes of their own designs, they're having to collaborate to do this, they're having to map out this grid, say where all the specific Post-it notes go, and then this is another example of them getting to fill the room with their own designs. This is them mapping it out on grid paper first, having to start to think about how arrays can function creatively, and I think then implementing it. I think that's it for me. I'm going to pass it along to Kim.
Hi, I wanted to say a few things about the professional developments. For me, I think being able to look at the standards and really have them unpacked and kind of pull them apart gave me a better understanding so that we could reassemble them and sort of use those cross-cutting concepts as a hinge pin. The second thing was the collaboration. Some of the best ideas came out of just bouncing them off of the teachers and the teaching artists. Just a small germ of an idea became, something that was really workable, and it gave the teaching artists and the teachers a chance to become accustomed to that, because a lot of times, in the classroom, you often have to pivot, and so having someone there to kind of bounce an idea off of was very helpful, and it made things pretty exciting sometimes, but it made things interesting because sometimes what we did was student driven. Someone would say something and that would spark an idea, and we would kind of adjust what we were doing to accommodate their good idea. What you're looking at is our final projects for Bird's Eye and Ant's Eye View. This came as an extension. I think at the time that the STEAM teachers were talking about, we had just come out of COVID, and we had talked about your place in space looking out of the window. And the STEAM teachers sort of extended that and said, well, what happens if your space changes? What does your space look like if it's bird's eye view or ant's eye view or, human eye view? And these were the final projects that we came up with in the third grade. We had to look at what kind of skills they needed, both in STEAM and in art, to be able to get them to this point. So we had a series of lessons that we did. They didn't have a lot of art background, so we did a lot of basic art. We did color theory. We did texture and line and things like that. And at the end, this is what we came up with. We divided the room up into birds camp and ants camp. And they were allowed to they had their own project, but they were allowed to help each other if anyone had a problem. So there was some collaboration there. This is the bird's eye view where they created a miniature of the city, and they weren't really familiar. We did some things with looking over the city of Chicago and the lake, and they were not really familiar with a lot of that. But afterwards, they were able to take found objects and whatever they could find in the room. We had a ton of stuff all over the room, and they could use any of it to create it, and this is what they came up with their bird's eye view. My ant's eye view, this was sort of material driven. They had to think of, what do we drop in the grass? And after they decided what they wanted to make, they were allowed to go around the room, pick objects, put together objects. They used clay, and they created things that they drop in the grass. These are actually pie boxes, so there's cellophane in the middle of the box. We created grass, and they put their object in the grass. And let's see if I do this right. I did. All right. This is a box of French fries. They sculpted a box of French fries, and I think that's a crayon box that they covered up and kind of put the McDonald's on there, and they used clay to create the French fries. This is how it looks when you drop it in the grass. However, if you pick the pie box up and you looked at it from underneath, you could see it was much bigger, and that gave them an idea of how an ant would view it. These were kindergartners, and we extended the point of view into the classroom, and we talked about language arts. And the idea of point of view is a little complicated for kindergartners, but what we did was we took a story called They All Saw a Cat, and it took you through the story of this one cat, how the child that owned it saw the cat, how the mouse saw the cat, how the bird saw the cat. And we created these puppets from that. If you look on this side, you can see that would be how the child saw the cat. This is how another animal saw the cat. I think this was how an owl saw the cat. And then this was, they got to flip it. So it was two sides to the same cat. So that kind of gave them the idea of this is the same character, but they are seeing it in two different ways. And according to the kindergarten teacher, it really did kind of help them get the concept of point of view. Thank you.
Hi. I am just going to quickly talk about the development of this one project that was all oriented around a very simple concept of symmetry, but it really developed in collaboration with both Andrea Mealy, the STEAM teacher at 21st Century, but also very much with the students. And it was not something that we initially intended to do for so many weeks, but it kind of self-evolved, and it felt like the kids were really engaged, and they kept coming up with new ideas and new variations on it that we could pursue. So it evolved the first year I was teaching, and then we re-implemented it the second year and really got to refine it. So some of the activities that I'll be showing you over the next couple of minutes and things we were teaching them were about perfect symmetry versus near symmetry. We were mirroring with our bodies to understand symmetry, mirroring with sets of yarn. Rivers of symmetry were these lines of blue tape that we used to establish lines of symmetry, and we used them in various ways, as you'll see. Radial symmetry, looking at snowflakes and doing these symmetrical cities, which I'll get to in a minute. So we started talking, just looking at pictures and talking as a class about different planes of symmetry. So this is a horizontal plane of symmetry that's very familiar to anybody who's seen water. And then talking about how objects can be symmetrical across, or from one point of view, but not symmetrical from another point of view. And also talking about near symmetry versus relative symmetry. So asking students to talk about which elements of a photograph like this are symmetrical and which are not. Then we started by giving them two sets of colored yarn, where there were strands of yarn that were cut to specific lengths, and then each piece of yarn had a counterpart, or a pair. And then they were composing on either sides of a line of symmetry using these two congruent sets of yarn. And we immediately, throughout this whole thing, we were constantly reiterating the difference between a copy and a mirrored reflection of something, which is a surprisingly complex concept, actually, that they really did get. It was a very black and white understanding. And then, so we started working with objects, manipulables, on either side of a line, and just talking about having them kind of demonstrate that they understood the difference between mirroring and copying, mirroring and copying, and then using our hands constantly as a reference point for understanding symmetry, talking about symmetry in biology, then mirroring across a line of symmetry in the room with a partner. And this was also great for talking about empathy, and how we're constantly mirroring other people in the world and mirroring objects in the world as a way of understanding the world. And then we started building with manipulables in teams, and anytime a new object was introduced, each partner in the team would get one of the same thing. And then we got into radial symmetry, so talking about different instances in nature and in the world where radial symmetry shows up, objects that have multiple lines of symmetry. And then we started doing this same exercise with these rivers of symmetry, except creating radial constructions where the whole class was kind of collaborating and mirroring around 6 points, 6 lines of tape. And this was really impressive. And I was just so amazed at, like, this is all kindergarten through 3rd grade, so even kindergartners and 1st graders were getting this. And then we moved on to these symmetry cities where there were different construction planes. We had tape falling off tables, like making waterfalls and moving throughout the room, and classes would add their symmetrical constructions and then leave them behind, and the next class would come in and continue building on the last class's progress. And they just really ran away with it. Like it really, like once they kind of had the concept, they really wanted to push it and see how complex it could get. And that's it for me.
Okay, let's thank the teaching artists for taking us into the classroom. We will now talk about research with Dr. Louanne Smolin. Dr. Smolin is an urban educator with diverse experiences in arts research and teacher education. Her areas of expertise include curriculum reform through multimedia and arts integration. She has extensive knowledge in curriculum reform and serves as a researcher on large-scale program evaluations. Dr. Smolin has published journals and book chapters related to collaborative program evaluation, multimedia, and teacher professional development, and has also been a recipient of the Best Practice Award for the innovative use of technology with the American Association of Colleges for Teacher Education. Everyone here is Dr. Smolin.
First of all, always just so amazed by the work that I see. And I know that we researchers are to be impartial, but I am always blown away by what I see. And when I look at these examples, and we saw the progression from professional development into the classroom, I always see these pictures and hear these wonderful professionals talk, and I know that there is something going on here. So just, even when you look at this picture, just look at, you can see this amount of student engagement here. And there's this connection between the classroom and the outside world. So they're thinking about the outside environment and mimicking trees and trying to become like trees. And they're building this relationship. Look at this connection between this teaching artist and these students. And they're building this relationship with this new professional. And it's just remarkable to see. And my goal as a researcher is to pull this all apart, to unpack it, and to get a sense of how it all happens. And to particularly, what are students learning from this? So, I am wondering if just in your minds, or if you want to take out a piece of paper or write something, I'm just wondering, that's okay? If you can think in your heads, or based upon what you've seen or your experiences, what is your definition of STEAM? And just make a note of it in your head, make a little note on a piece of paper. I want to come back to that at the end after this little, okay. We have a lot going on here. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes, like 2, okay? So just think, write, whatever. Somehow my phone hasn't moved at all. Okay, feel free to keep working. But what I wanted to, okay, is that better? Okay, so the STEAM Ahead project was about developing, implementing, and disseminating STEAM curriculum, as you just have seen. The STEAM Ahead research aimed to understand how the STEAM curriculum can be structured, and it inviting rigorous interdisciplinary practices, and how both STEAM professional and curriculum development can have an impact on teacher practice, and also provide examples of what students can gain and learn. So, one of the things as a researcher that we all hear about researchers and developing questions and finding data from that and structuring a program, a research program around that inquiry. I really focus on and think a lot about evidence. And the 2 questions that I constantly think about are what counts as evidence and what evidence counts. So that first question leads you to think about what kinds of data can I collect in this particular project. The second one I find very essential. It leads me as a researcher to understand which numbers are significant, like which numbers matter here, which words signal growth or change, and which images add or extend ideas about learning and change. So all of this, especially the second question, I really asked a lot through this project, and it really helped me to get through the story of how things changed during the course of this project. Okay, so I just want to highlight 3 categories of data that I looked at around teacher learning and the curriculum insights. So I looked at whatever artifacts that were available from these curriculum projects and thought about a way to organize them and be able to identify what these projects were about, what kinds of learning was available through the process of engaging in this curriculum, and then how that impacted students. So in terms of the teachers, we did PD exit surveys. So by PD, I mean professional development. So after each professional development session, we gave them a short survey, and then it had both 5-point items that accessed what they were learning, what they were feeling more confident about, and what they could apply. And then we also asked open-ended questions. So this was done with the teachers who were involved in the program. And then we did pre- and post surveys with teachers both that were involved in the project and those other teachers who we found schools that matched characteristics of the schools that we were working at, but those teachers did not attend any professional development. The students were not involved in the program at all. So that is what we call treatment, program and control program, so we could see what kinds of differences there were that we could attribute to the STEAM Ahead program. Okay. So the first question that's asked is, did you understand the objectives of this PD session? And as you can see, over the course of, this was in, from year 2020, 2021, over the course of those professional development sessions, you can see that they are, they have a high level of understanding pretty much across all of those sessions. And this is important because the hope is that professional development will impact classroom practice, that they'll be able to take and carry what they're learning from professional development into their classrooms with their students. Okay. Okay, the second question that I thought was important to highlight is confidence. So the first question had to do with understanding. This question has to do with confidence, another important aspect of being able to take some learning and apply it is if you have the confidence to do that. And I specifically asked, how confident are you in your ability to incorporate arts in your STEAM-based teaching? And this is, you can see as well that they made significant changes here across the professional development period, so that they became very confident and close to extremely confident in incorporating the arts in what they were doing. And then the last area that I wanted to talk about was being able to apply. So these are all self-report. I asked the teachers, what do you think you'll be able to apply in your classrooms? So this, again, you can see an upward trajectory. So these three areas, knowledge and understanding, confidence, and behavior, or their application, are very important in terms of being able to take something that's learned in one setting and bring it into another. So we saw that, at least through self-report, the teaching artists were really doing well at taking up these practices that they were learning in PD. Okay, the next section was really interesting. That was the open-ended sections, and we asked them a few questions each time. And this question that we asked them was, what will you take away that you might apply? So then we're asking the same question in a different way. And the process to get through this is to just look at all of their responses and see what kinds of patterns you see from those. So these were the areas where I saw patterns, that number of responses. The three top ones were content integration, documentation and assessment, and curriculum development. And to me, those are like three incredibly important aspects of STEAM. So, the next step, though, so we get these categories, but then it's helpful to kind of put it in a model, like, well, what does that mean? It's great to have the numbers and the frequency counts, and that we're hearing responses from the teachers. So I really thought about these as things that they were talking about in which they'd be able to blend what they were learning from PD into the classrooms, and things that might have been barriers between PD. So, so then, looking at that, I can give you some examples of what the teachers said. So these first two have to do with content integration. So translating activities into overarching verbs to find connections between disciplines. how interesting it was that the process involved for art making and the thinking for the science activity generated similar words. So that's, I think, a very wonderful key idea, that vocabulary can help you traverse across disciplinary boundaries. The second one, science and art are so interconnected through the commonality of curiosity. Very strong statement about content integration. The third one has to do with documentation and assessment. I have a broadened sense of what documentation and assessment might look like in our classroom. Student work demonstrates the knowledge of what the students are able to take away from the class. To me, this was really big because I've worked with CAPE for, what is it, like 13 years? Something. I was young when I started. So. And, you know, documentation is a core practice within CAPE. I'm assuming it's a core artistic practice, and it's something very unique that they've brought to classrooms. And I've seen it being applied in very different ways, you know, all across these different projects that I've worked on with CAPE. I have been really wanting to see and try to work through thinking about how documentation can be used as well as student assessment. And it involves students taking a step back and looking at the work they've produced and thinking and writing and talking about it, teachers doing the same thing. But it's not an easy sell always, because it's kind of like that last step in a curriculum project. And it's not always easy to implement. Jessica did an amazing project with portfolio assessment, and she could tell you much about it. It was just amazing. Anyways, this was the first time that I saw a comment like this, that student work demonstrates the knowledge of what the students are able to take away from the class. I mean, that's like, says it all. And I was really happy to see it. The last two comments, strong structure is a great basis for flexible development of curriculum design and a sense of how to set parameters for a project and how simplifying a project can often yield more uninhibited participation and better results. These are really wonderful curriculum design ideas, and I think this notion of flexibility within constraints is it's a really nice curriculum design idea that I think in the documentation, I think that all of that can make it possible for these projects to be disseminated. In terms of the pre and post data, so this was a longer survey in which the teachers from the treatment schools and the teachers from the schools that didn't participate in the project both responded to this survey. So the areas where I saw differences between those two that would lead us to believe that there were changes made because of the participation in the STEAM program was that the STEAM Ahead teachers provided more frequent opportunities for their students to demonstrate their learning than did teachers in the control classrooms. And that, this is another big one, goes along with that curriculum design aspect. STEAM Ahead teachers learned new strategies for structuring time within curriculum lessons. This included setting parameters for projects and diversifying the types of classroom projects. As such, teachers offered greater flexibility within learning activities and more opportunities for student choice within the curriculum. So those were, I think, very encouraging findings on teacher growth. So yay. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is the curriculum. So you saw, this is just an example of some of the documentation that I had access to. So there was text, there's images along with the various stages of the projects, and there's the different instructional materials or source materials that might have been used within the context of a project. So you have to figure out a way to kind of look across all of these very unique, disparate projects. So one thing that is common to CAPE projects are these areas. So big ideas, inquiry questions, collaboration, how I can see collaboration, how teachers are writing about it, the documentation, what materials I'm actually seeing, is it multimedia, is it annotated, all of those kinds of things. And then assessment. So those are the kind of the, in terms of researchable, those are the areas when looking at curriculum that you can, that we've been able to research. So then with that, I take all of these projects and I look across them, and in looking across them, I was able to isolate these patterns that I could really look at and sense the different ways in which these were approached. And I think that these are also beneficial in terms of disseminating the curriculum. So those areas are arts within STEAM, or how each of the projects incorporated arts within STEAM. The student choice making. So in what ways did the teachers and teaching artists provide opportunities for students to make choices? Research making and art making. So research is a part of both. You saw that how in the drawings about artists and scientists, and part of that is both are involved in research making. So I wanted to look at that. And then interdisciplinarity, so how they're crossing all of those disciplines. So here's just some examples of some of the ways that this was talked about. So, and this is, David, I think this is from your project. So, so again, this writing is from teaching artists, it's from the classroom teachers, some of it's from the students. So this was an example. We zoomed way in on snowflakes following a big snowfall and looked at the microphotography of Wilson Bentley. Is that your? Yeah. That led to several sessions exploring symmetry and reflections, which brought us to a class about hands in which we made abstract compositions by tracing our hands in different configurations. To explore the concept of bilateral symmetry, we began by exploring the relative symmetry of our bodies with a focus on our hands. We prompted students to place their hands together in front of their faces and then open them like a book or the wings of a butterfly. So I thought that this was a wonderful example of interdisciplinarity. Symmetry is an amazing interdisciplinary concept. It's very dynamic, and it encourages the kind of visualizing and mental rotation that builds both scientific and mathematic thinking. So I thought this was a wonderful example of interdisciplinarity. And then, so here's some other examples. This is another project around, I think this one was around personal map making. So the teachers, you know, what I'm seeing here, there's a lot of variety here in the actual work that the students are doing. So the comment that came along with these images was, in the images above, students share their personal maps. As you can see, students approached the prompt very differently. Some did not use color, but included very fine, refined rendering. Other students used color very expressively, representing a wider range of texture. Some students connected the representative significance of the shapes they were making, which others used parts of this exercise to purely explore their own mark making. So we have both images and text here to describe this. This is actual evidence of student choice making. And we saw this across the curriculum projects. Through interviews and within the curriculum documents themselves, I was able to really see this thematic analysis. I was able to analyze what these teachers' conceptions of STEAM were. And so the main themes that I saw is that the STEAM curriculum is idea-driven instruction that invites exploration of a wide variety of materials for engineering a final product. That STEAM, through dialogue, teachers and students can assess their current progress, providing insights fruitful for guiding their continued explorations. So STEAM is collective. And finally, teachers and students think and act across disciplines through an inquiry stance that invites an opening up of the disciplines and interdisciplinary research. So one of the teachers talked about that she just opens things up for the students, that they talk about an idea and she just invites them to open it up and to think across her classroom, the other classrooms, outside. So this idea of opening up, I think, is really key. The selection of materials and the ways in which they are used helps students to think and act across disciplines. Okay. Oops. Hang on one sec. Yes, yes. Okay, so now, finally, okay. Let's talk about students. We approached looking at students in a few different ways, and the way that I want to talk to you about today is an assessment that we've created, and it's a performance-based assessment. So we asked the students to look at some images of kinetic sculptures and to talk about these kinetic sculptures. We showed them a variety of different source material. We showed them not just sculptures out there in parks, but teachers and students creating kinetic sculptures. And we asked them questions like, how would an artist make a kinetic sculpture? How would a scientist create a kinetic sculpture? What are the similarities and differences between scientists and artists? We wanted to see their understanding of STEAM, their understanding of inquiry, their understanding of research, and their ideas about sharing work. So these were the kinds of questions that we talked to as we were looking over these images with them. We did this with groups of students in both the treatment classrooms and the control classrooms. And we transcribed all of the videotapes and used their responses, their actual responses, and created a rubric, an analytic rubric in which we were able to kind of discern 5 different levels within each of these areas. So it was a very generative process. Then we were able to go through and score all of the transcripts. And the way that we did this is that we went through each question and went through every single student's response of that question. So in other words, we didn't look at one student and all of their questions. So it gave us a really good idea of the range of response. And I'm going to just show you some examples. Oops, wrong way. Okay. So I was able to see differences between the students who were involved in the program, their 2021 responses and 2022 responses. So in other words, I these were all scored as a group, and I was able to take the means for each question from one year to the next. So the examples that I'm going to show you are not necessarily from the same student who grew from one set to the other. They're more examples of what a response was from each of those levels. So the three areas where there was a significant difference between the first year we did this and the second year was how would a scientist create a kinetic sculpture? That students, their understanding and descriptions of the concept of STEAM became more nuanced, and the students understood how research is a part of an artistic practice or a scientific practice. So here's just the examples. So in that 2021 year, when the students talked about how would a scientist create a kinetic sculpture, their responses, this was a typical response. I think that they would be able to think about what they're going to make. They need a lot of things, so you always want to make sure you have the things first. Don't just do it right away. So they're talking about bringing materials together, and that was at a kind of an emerging beginning level. In the second year, we heard responses like, you get all your supplies, get some glue, a pencil, and draw the thing that you want to make first, then make it. Then make sure it stands up straight. So they're putting in some ideas about what the task involves with making a kinetic sculpture. So I think a scientist would take their time researching its absent, its place, where it's going to be. Then they would make the sculpture like the artist would make the sculpture. So a scientist would make a sculpture like an artist would make a sculpture. Their understanding of the concept of STEAM. So in the first year, they would say things like, on certain days there will be science, on certain days there will be technology, on certain days there will be engineering. Other days there will be art, and if you have an all-math school, then most of the days there will be math. So they've got these very discrete subject areas. I always love what students say. And then, as in the second year, you'd hear things like, well, there's a lot of lessons you have to learn in STEAM. Like you have to learn communities. You have to learn how to do blueprints. You have to learn about the world. So it's just such a global, across all kinds of boundaries types of comment, and it's got real world implications. I just thought that was amazing. Okay. And then how the student understands how research is a part of artistic practice or scientific practice. This is really, I think, an interesting topic to pursue. So in the beginnings, like looking something up, if you look something up, then you'll find the question that the person's asking you about for art projects. I don't know how to explain it in science. Our teacher says, we couldn't look stuff up in science if you're doing a question, because that would be cheating. So very kind of teacher-driven, using the internet, that kind of research. Then as in the following year, research is required for art or science because you want to make sure it's good. Because some art projects or science projects, they could be really hard to do unless you label and follow steps, which is why in some things people add instructions, which is this whole exhibition that's going on now is about instructions. So you can see how their comments get much more nuanced. Okay, so just to sum what I've just talked about, through the professional development, teachers reported they understood the purpose of PD sessions, they applied what they were learning in their classrooms, and they became more confident integrating the arts. The teachers' insights that related to integrating the content areas, providing students with curricular structure or parameters, and documentation as a window on assessment, these were the comments that were most often made in terms of what they're going to apply in their classrooms. The curriculum projects that we went through showed viable examples of how the arts can not only be integrated, but an important process for student learning. And their students' ideas about the work of scientists, the concept of STEAM, and how research is a part of scientific and artistic processes grew over the course of the program. So a lot of good things to pull apart. Okay, so now, let's just take a minute or two. So now I ask you, you're going to get involved in this research with me. What have you added or taken away from your definition of STEAM that, from anything from this session?